Laji, the CTO and co-founder of InCore Semiconductors, an early-stage fabless startup focused on providing class-leading RISCV processors IPs out of India. He's a graduate from the National Institute of Technology, Warangal, and a PhD from IIT Madras. Dr. Neel is also one of the developers of the Shakti series of microprocessors initiated at IIT Madras and was the lead architect of India's first indigenously designed 64-bit RISCVP chip. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Neel also serves as the vice chair of the compliance test group of the RISCV International. Like most people said, he looks too young for his age, but ladies and gentlemen, let's kindly hear it for Neel.
Thank you for the kind introduction and good morning, Gandhinagar. To start off, huge thanks to Honorable Minister, to mighty officials and Karnavati University to have one of the non-white beards sitting on the first row. It's always an honor to be the youngest in this crowd, but I would like to not be the only one. I would like to see a lot of you people, especially the ones behind, come forward, share the stage with all of us. I think that's what India is looking for. So my story is not going to be about products because we are a very early stage startup. InCore has been registered in 2018. So I'm going to talk about how InCore came into being, what the origins are. Just like every superhero, there is an origin story. I'm going to start from there, spend 5 minutes on that and 5 minutes on InCore and what we're planning to do and how we plan to make sure that India gets or demands, the demand that India has to get a seat on the table, we'll make sure that it happens through InCore, right? So, like every other thing, can you get the slides? Awesome. So this all started back in 2012 with a very innocent, an academic and a very personal motivation, which said, I wanted to do my PhD in computer architecture. And there was a huge gap in what Indian academics were doing and what was cutting edge and what was being done in silicon, right? No quality research would have translated to actual silicon. And I wanted to bridge that gap. That sort of sowed the inspiration, the first seed. And eventually what came out was Shakti, right? So we started off with Shakti. And every time when you venture on such things, you have this small window of opportunity where you can go crazy, you can go wild, you can think of radical ideas on what you want to do, how you want to change things, how do you foresee how the world is going to be. And that's exactly what we did. We chose languages like BlueSpec System Verilog. We wanted to do verification with Python. We wanted to use open source compilers. More importantly, we said since this is an academic initiative, we wanted to make everything open source, right? Whatever we do, it's going to be available. The mistakes we do is going to be made available to everyone to learn from, right? We're not going to restrict ourselves to just 10 members of the lab or to just the institute, but the world over is going to see what we're doing and collaborate and engage with us. And that's the easy part, right? The tough part just begins. Once you figure out what you want to do and where you want to do and how you, what you want to do and how you want to do it, it's the doing that becomes difficult, right? So we did the usual. We were good at the engineering part. We started spreading the word. We got more people engaged. We got workshops. We did conferences. We got people to see that. Any feedback we got, we put it back on the open source. And, eventually jackpot. MIT came and funded us. We were involved in their indigenous microprocessor development program. More importantly, Intel caught the eye. They realized that we're doing something really amazing. And they offered the 22 nanometer shuttle in 2017. HCL, one of the leaders in the VLSI services domain in the world, sort of also bought the whole RISC-V story and what we were planning to do and pushing Indian processors. They lent us 15 to 20 engineers in order to make a 64-bit RISC-V, the first of its kind, a reality in India, right? This was done with just 12 students, right? In the conventional architecture world, this would be called a pizza delivery team, right? These are people who've not done architecture, who've not done any silicon before. We were able to design a completely open source, one of its kind, 64-bit, the most complex core that you can think of, which was able to boot Linux in 3 days, right? So this was a huge achievement. Being a part of it, and I'm very, enthusiastic when we talk about it because I've always undermined the opportunity that I've been given. But looking back, it's definitely a milestone which has put India on the map, especially in the RISC-V world. And the kind of humdrum, the kind of push and the motivations we've got and the adoptions we got from the private and strategic sector, forming InCore was a no-brainer, right? There had to be a commercial aspect. Otherwise, it would just be injustice to leave it at that point. So that is the origins. Now we talk about 2018. This is where InCore was registered. And like any other startup in this domain, we're going to have to make very tough decisions. One of the toughest decisions we've done is to be bootstrapped, right? We did not go for VCs. We did not go for angel investors. Primarily because of two reasons. One, there was a very strong India drive. We did not want to shift bases offshore or be headquartered in the US or the Silicon Valley where we would have got funding much easier. And more importantly, the VC or the investor community in India at that point, I don't think they quite understood what it means for InCore to be present, right? They did not have the appetite actually to invest in a semicon or an IP startup at that point. And we wanted to ride the wave and figure out, how does this pan out? Now, making a chip, it takes a village, right? We are in no assumption that InCore can do all of it, and that's our initial strategy. We start off to build an ecosystem of three major players, HCL, TCS, and Tessol. While InCore focuses on its strengths of building RISC-V processors and the cutting-edge solutions, we sort of engaged with our partners. We got them involved in the whole RISC-V game, the indigenous game, and they were able to contribute verification, validation, emulations, software stacks, physical design, and InCore was just focused on what its strengths are, right? We were not distracted by doing everything under the world just to get the first solution out. And I think that played very well for us in the initial days, right? Instead of investing too much on everything else, we were only focused on what our strengths were. Now, every day as a startup, when you get up, 8 a.m., the first thing you check is the bank balance and how do you make sure that the costs are minimal, right? And I think our engineering model, the novelty that we've brought in, our entire engineering stack, right from designing the processor to validating it, verifying it, emulating it, it's all based on open source stack, right? So when it comes to tooling, InCore is a very asset-light company, right? We do not invest a lot in the tools. We actually invest a lot in the intellect part of the intellectual property, right? In the manpower. And that's where we want to focus on. So our engineering model allows every one of our employees to work from anywhere. And because it's open source, there is a community already existing, there's a forum already existing, there's a community existing, and people can ramp themselves up for InCore even before joining InCore, right? So that's the idea that we started off with. And finally, manpower, and this is just a bullet point where I wanted to share the COVID scenario. Being registered in 2018, 2020 was a tough year for all of us. But for InCore, it was a blessing in disguise. We realized that a lot of academics, freshers, the guys who were getting admits across the world in really amazing universities, they kept deferring their admissions by a year or a 2 year. And that's where InCore came up with a scholar program. We said that we don't need your full-time commitment or we don't need 5 years of your commitment. We are happy with the 1 year or the 2 year that you give us, but we want the best quality, right? So we defined and we structured our milestones such a way that we were able to leverage on these kind of opportunities because these guys are bright minds. They've definitely been admitted in the world-class institutes, but no MNC is going to give them a job just for 1 year, right? And that's where InCore sort of took the lead, and it especially worked out in our favor in the very initial and early years. And finally, 4 years down, completely bootstrapped, we are a 20-member team, hoping to expand significantly in the coming quarter. We have 3 classes of core generators, typically targeting the lower and the mid-range embedded systems. We also maintain a very good amount of open source portfolio. We are continuously giving back to the community because we believe that's the way the whole domain of RISC-V is supposed to grow. You cannot be closed door when it comes to RISC-V. And I finally, I appreciate the kind of momentum and the impetus that the government has put up, the DLI schemes, the 10 billion outlay program that has been out there. This all convinces me, much more than when I started off in 2018 or 2016 as a fresher. InCore will become the de facto Atmanirbhar choice when it comes to process. That is the gap that InCore is set out to fill. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.
Much, and without further delay,